Hey, it's Soul, bringing to you the World of Warcraft, and I wanted to follow up on yesterday's video about kind of the philosophies behind the design changes that happened with legendaries, and kind of get into just a couple specifics as to what's going on, because now we finally have numbers since a PTR build was deployed just yesterday. The quick recap on yesterday's video is that legendaries are going to get nerfed, well, not quite to the ground, but they're getting nerfed pretty hard as we're seeing. Many of these items that give a universal increase in throughput are being nerfed by anywhere between like 20-something% to maybe a little bit over 50. Now, of course, this is limited to legendary items. It's not like it's a 25 to 50% nerf to our class, but at least according to the forums, it's enough to start sharpening your pitchforks and start quitting and unsubbing and, going on a crusade to dismantle Blizzard. Anyway, because there were a lot of legendaries that were nerfed, but at the same time, there's still a lot of stuff going on with classes that I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to go over like the super specifics as to, hey, this is what happened to I don't know, to a demon hunter, to a vengeance demon hunter. I'm not going to get that down and dirty, but I am going to cite a couple of examples. So you can kind of think of this as an overview of this current build. Now, as always, this is PTR information, so everything is subject to change. Clearly, everything has been subject to change. And it's important to note that for folks that are kind of new to this data analysis with looking at different builds and looking at the data mining or the patch notes or the lack of patch notes, is that these public test run builds, they happen every week. And in the meantime, Blizzard internally is releasing God knows how many builds a day. So to just kind of generalize what's been going on so far with this and the previous builds, secondary stats were kind of turned upside its head. A lot of legendaries were nerfed, certain classes or specs were given some special attention because of issues that they were having previously. And not all specs seem to be very close to done. There's still a lot of iteration going on that's, again, going on every week, at least according to what we see. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that Blizzard, with giving us these PTR builds, is giving us the empowerment to respond, to give feedback, to get angry. But at the same time, each build isn't indicative of what our class is, and it's only a small indicator of the direction that our classes are going. Game design isn't as easy as measure twice, cut once. It is literally deploying build after build after build, and from where we are to where we're finally going to get to, you're going to find that the journey between that, it's going to be like this whole roller coaster of reaction. So if you're catching yourself being a little bit too concerned over all these builds, just kind of step back, calm down a little bit, just relax a little bit, alright? Alright, so I'll touch on these changes real quick, and I'm going to be using MMO Champion to go over some of the stat overviews and some of the changes that had gone on with at least some of these legendaries. So prior as the tanking neck, it got kind of a rebalance. The bubble went down from 30% to only 25%. As a protection paladin, I don't mind losing a little bit of the mastery in favor of haste, and I'm sure that for other classes, you guys probably love this change. The tanking trinket that's going to come out in 715 is going to have its shield, its bubble reduced from 50% of maximum health to 40%. Overall, yeah, it's both a defensive and a throughput loss, and probably exacerbated by classes and specs that have a higher health pool, like Guardian Druids. Still though, it's hard to hate on something that hasn't been out in the public yet. Other legendaries had a kind of indirect throughput decrease. Like for example, the Hunter Ring gives a pretty obvious loss in damage. But these particular Hunter Boots, they reduce the proc effectiveness by about 20%. Meanwhile, this Ret Paladin Ring had the Holy Power generation reduced by, well, kind of a lot. And that'll affect uptime and basically DPS in a number of ways. You can take a look at MMO Champion for Wowhead for the details that pertain to your class and spec. But speaking of Ret Paladins, I wanted to touch on that specifically because in this build, Blessing of Might was removed. Blessing of Might has been a concern for Blizzard, and in the previous Q&A, Ian said that, yeah, basically Blessing of Might sucks and we're going to do something about it. But it looks like they're going to do something about it right now. So now that it's gone, Blizzard compensated by giving Ret Paladins a direct buff by like 10 to 12% of most of their skills, but not all of them. But I want to talk about these damage modifier auras that Blizzard is using in each of these PTR builds, because they might be a little bit hard to understand, or just a little bit hard to easily see for players. So I jumped over to Wowhead to take a look at the aura modifiers that were provided for each class, and we can see that there, different things were done. Everyone on this list got a nice little bump, including rogues who had a previous bump from 7%, and now it's gone up another 5% up up to 12. And these aura buffs aren't exactly a, direct buff to everything that a class or spec does. They're pretty specific, and we have to look at Wowhead, look a little bit deeper in order to see what's going on. So I'm reading here that these auras affect these abilities by 12%. And these are all mainstay abilities: Crusader Strike, Judgment, Consecration, and so on. But specific to Red Paladins in this particular build, there was a little bit more that was done. Flash of Light has been buffed even more, given a 42% buff, but on top of that it was given a 22% increase in mana cost. Meanwhile, Consecration's damage was increased by 100%, and you can see this change visually according to the live and the current PTR build. Now again, these are just PTR builds, incomplete information. Not all the specs and classes have been affected by this aura, so if you're interested in seeing for yourself what's going on with your class, apart from just jumping into the PTR yourself, of course take a look at MMO Champion or Wowhead or your favorite fan sites, take a look at the nerfs or changes that happen with legendaries, but at the same time I'm going to give a link to each and every one of the affected specs and classes with this whole spec aura update thing that they're doing. That way you can see what kind of compensations were made to counteract the nerfs to legendaries. It's also important to note though that for the many of us that don't have like any legendaries, these are all pretty much buffs for us, which is pretty nice. But all this remains to be seen. We might get one more build before the end of this year, and then it's whenever the patch comes out. It could be January, it could be a little bit later. If they wanted to delay the Nighthold raid, they probably could, and since they didn't really announce a date, well, what can we say really? Anyway, take a look at the information, let me know what you guys think about your particular spec or class, just how bad is the doom and gloom for you, if anything. Of course, like and sub because hey, that sustains me, and otherwise that's pretty much all I got for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the news. I'm Soul, stay breezy guys. Stay beat guys.